Indiana man convicted of killing 4 people has been put to death. It was the state's first execution in 15 years.
New this morning, we're learning that the Indiana Supreme Court is denying Joseph Corkran a stay.
Convicted killer in Indiana is set to be executed by the state before sunrise tomorrow.
In Indiana's first execution in 15 years, the state carried out the death sentence of Joseph Corkran, a man convicted of killing 4 people, including his own brother. The case shocked Fort Wayne in 1997 and now, decades later, has reignited debates on mental illness, justice, and capital punishment in America. On July 26, 1997, Joseph Corkran fatally shot his brother James, his sister's fiancé Robert Turner, and their 2 friends Timothy Bricker and Douglas Stillwell in Fort Wayne. The motive? A blend of paranoia and rage that many believe stemmed from untreated mental illness. He was convicted in 1999 and sentenced to death, though he maintained a fragile mental state throughout.
You may remember Corkran killed his brother James, his sister's fiancé Robert Turner, and their friends Timothy Bricker and Douglas Stillwell. All were found shot multiple times on Bayer Avenue on July 26, 1997.
Corkran spent over 2 decades on death row, diagnosed multiple times with paranoid schizophrenia. His lawyers filed appeal after appeal, including federal motions and clemency pleas. Protesters, faith leaders, and even some lawmakers urged Indiana's governor to halt the execution, arguing that killing a mentally ill man would be both immoral and unconstitutional.
For Joseph Corkran, the man who killed 4 people in Fort Wayne in 1997, one of his last chances to stay alive rests in the hands of Governor Eric Holcomb.
As the execution date neared, December 18th, tension gripped Indiana. Public defenders, spiritual leaders, and protesters organized vigils and rallies, but legal motions were denied one after another. The state prepared to carry out its first execution since 2009. In the early hours of December 18, 2024, Joseph Corkran was strapped to a gurney in Indiana State Prison. His final meal? Ben and Jerry's ice cream. His last words were chillingly detached. "Not really. Let's get this over with." He was pronounced dead at 12:44 a.m., ending a decades-long chapter, while the governor and attorney general stood firm, stating the case had been reviewed more than 25 times.
His last words were, "Not really, let's get this over with."
The execution stirred strong reactions. Protesters argued it was inhumane to execute a mentally ill man. Meanwhile, legal experts and clergy questioned the moral implications of capital punishment. For some, justice was served. For others, it was another state-sanctioned killing. Faith groups warned, when the state teaches violence as a solution, the consequences echo far beyond prison walls.
We will witness what our state is doing in our name. We will witness that our state tax dollars and our citizenship is supporting a killing.
Those closest to Joseph were present during his final moments. His wife, Tina Corkran, who had known him since junior high, came to say goodbye. His childhood pastor was allowed to be by his side. To them, he wasn't just a killer. He was someone they had known and loved, whose life unraveled under the weight of severe mental illness.
His childhood pastor, Reverend David Leitzel, was allowed to be by his side in his final moments, and prison officials say his last meal was Ben and Jerry's ice cream.
The execution of Joseph Corkran forces us to reckon with hard questions. Can justice truly exist when mental illness clouds intention? In the pursuit of closure, how many lives must be shattered twice? One thing is certain, this wasn't just the end of a life. It was the ignition of a new debate on what justice in America truly means. A 10-year-old girl lured by cartoons, a man with chilling fantasies, and a crime that stunned America. The murder of Jamie Rose Boland wasn't just another tragedy. It exposed the terrifying reality of evil hiding in plain sight. This is the story of Kevin Ray Underwood and the justice that took nearly 2 decades to arrive.
Underwood brutally murdered 10-year-old Jamie Rose Boland back in 2006. She was his neighbor.
Underwood today for brutally murdering his 10-year-old neighbor back in 2006.
KOCO does have a team at the state penitentiary waiting for news of Underwood's death. KOCO's Colby Terrell runs us through the case and the final appeal.
Jamie had just happened to wander by his apartment, and Jamie was lured into Kevin's apartment as Kevin told her that she could see his pet rat and also watch a SpongeBob cartoon.
Jamie Rose Boland was only 10 years old when she fell into the hands of a predator living just feet away. Kevin Underwood, consumed by cannibalistic and sexual fantasies, lured her into his apartment under the pretense of watching cartoons. But what followed was a horror too graphic for most to imagine. She was struck with a cutting board, strangled, and mutilated. Underwood confessed to storing her body with the intention of eating it. The crime shook the quiet town of Purcell, Oklahoma, and the jury took just 20 minutes to convict him.
Jurors needed just 20 minutes this morning to convict Kevin Ray Underwood of killing 10-year-old neighbor Jamie Rose Boland as part of a cannibalistic fantasy.
For nearly 18 years, Kevin Underwood sat on death row at the Oklahoma State Penitentiary. His legal team repeatedly pointed to his traumatic childhood and severe mental health disorders in an attempt to spare his life. Clemency hearings were scheduled, delayed, and rescheduled amid board resignations and legal disputes. But despite these efforts, the state remained resolute. The justice system had not forgotten Jamie.
I recognize that although I do not want to die, I recognize that I deserve to for what I did. And I would like to apologize to the victim's family.
As the execution date approached, Oklahoma prepared for the first of its final acts in 2024. Underwood's legal team made one last appeal, but the court denied the stay. December 19th was set. The countdown to justice had begun. On the morning of December 19th, 2024, Kevin Underwood awoke to his last day. His final meal request was undisclosed, and his last words were an apology, not just to the victim's family, but to his own. At 10:14 a.m., he was pronounced dead. The Boland family, watching from the witness room, finally heard the words they'd waited 18 years to hear. Justice had been served.
Kevin Underwood was put to death at 10:14 this morning.
I'm hopeful that now that this process is over, that the family will be able to not worry about Kevin Underwood or think about him anymore.
As news of the execution spread, the public reaction was divided. Some saw closure, others questioned the delay. 18 years from conviction to injection. Abolition groups pointed to Underwood's childhood trauma and mental health. But for many Oklahomans, the focus remained on Jamie, her stolen life, her lost future, and the justice that, though long delayed, had finally come.
Kevin Underwood was ostracized, shamed, and bullied by his parents and his classmates. It contributed to his isolation and mental illness. It led him to commit an unspeakable horror against 10-year-old Jamie Boland. We grieve for Jamie and Kevin and the senseless loss of their lives.
Media witnesses described the scene inside the chamber. Underwood had a tear in his eye. His final words were quiet, his breath hitched. At 10:06, his eyes closed. By 10:14, he was gone. One reporter noted his unconscious body raised a middle finger, an involuntary reflex. Or was it more?
2 minutes, his middle finger went up. and it stayed up. And as he, around 10:13, the hand went back to a ball.
Kevin Underwood's execution marked the end of a long, agonizing chapter, not just for Jamie's family, but for a community haunted by unimaginable evil. In a world where monsters can live just a door away, Jamie's story is a chilling reminder. Justice may be slow, but memory is eternal. And some names, like hers, must never be forgotten.